So this week I came across something that a friend had written, a fellow storyteller by the name of Antonio Sacra, who is a wonderful storyteller out of the California area, and it moved me a lot because of where I am right now, where we are, but I think personally where I am. So this would be a little bit of a vulnerable moment, if you will, that I think also ties into the scripture. But it's a little bit of a performance piece, so I'm sort of splitting the message. It's not here because it was a last-minute sort of thought, and I wrote this this past couple of days. So I just want you to know that I'm going to do a little bit of a performance piece here for our story time, so to speak, and then we'll just share a couple of thoughts during the message. I don't want you to think that you might be here till 12:30 or 1 o'clock or something like that, and miss the kickoff or something. You might miss the kickoff anyway, but you won't miss anything else. As I was thinking about our text this morning, this idea of what it means to renew ourselves, I found myself being caught between a dream and reality. And it seems like life is lived between dream and reality. I had this dream as a children's author. This dream was, and still is to some degree, because I still have a couple of books that are still sitting out there published, that this fall, because my books are oriented around fall, this fall I have this dream that for once my book is going to take off. My book is going to take off, and Scholastic Book Publishers is going to email me and email my publisher, and they're going to say, we want to start carrying Tom's book, which will mean hundreds and hundreds of dollars of royalty, and my book will be all over the nation. The dream is to simply tell my stories, and someone's going to hear me online. I had this dream that someone's going to hear me. They're going to hire an editor. My story is fascinating. They're going to hire an editor. They're going to call me, and the editor will come and write down my amazing story, will offer me a six-figure income to publish it. And it will be a bestseller. It will make people laugh and cry and believe in themselves. The dream is that I'll be able to retire and simply choose where I want to visit for my book signings, or for my interviews, or perhaps for a reading. Maybe it'll be Seattle. I won't have to go to Marshall, Texas. I can go to Seattle, San Francisco, perhaps even London, and I'll just go and I'll stay. I'll get to choose the kinds of hotels that I will stay in. The royalties will pour in. And sure, of course, the dream also includes that I'll spend a little bit on some charity. And perhaps the dream will include that I'll form a little foundation that will help others. The dream is that people on Sunday morning will come in here. They will fill this room. They will stuff this room, cowboy game or no cowboy game. And I will deliver an amazing message. The dream is that people will spontaneously applaud. And the online viewership for my... I guess I could sit down now. The dream is that the viewership for my sermons will explode, that someone will pick up my blog post and it will be read by thousands of people, that it'll be read by at least dozens of people. And my blog site and blog sites like Huffington Post will contact me so that I can start writing for them in their religion section. The dream is that Linda and I will retire in a mountain home in Vermont, and our kids become successful and self-sufficient and happily married. The dream is they'll even come to church on occasion. And they'll be exactly everything as I imagine, and they will have lots of grandchildren, and they will come to see us instead of always us having to go see them. The dream is that you make it filthy rich. The dream is that your contract, your song, your project, your sculpture, your story, your consulting business takes off, and you don't have to work for hours and hours or odd jobs. Your Facebook page is overflowing with accolades and praise, and you're busy every weekend with friends who are calling for dinner or lunch or dates. The dream is you live in a beautiful home and your kids are all grown up, living self-sufficiently, marrying people you approve of, happy with careers and jobs and homes, and on until they come and see you in retirement, and you'll be healthy and wealthy and wise for years to come. The dream is your role, your project, your song, your coaching business, your conversation, your date will. The reality is the blank page, the day-to-day grind of living, the zero inbox, the friends I haven't heard from for months or years, the crappy, inconsiderate boss who takes advantage of you because he or she doesn't have a clue that you have dreams because you're a stepping stone to their dream. The reality is office politics and alliances, dysfunctional teams and backbiting and competition. The reality is a world filled with fear and divisiveness and polarized opinions and stress and struggling to make ends meet. The reality is a world stressed by global tyranny and populations seeking survival in places where people's dreams do not have room for them. The reality is a planet that is stressed by our dreams. Reality is also the day-to-day doubts and pep talks that we use in our head to make it to the next moment. And sometimes it's knowing that I don't belong here in this place, that I don't really have anything to say, that you and I sit for days and days at our desks or at a coffee shop or beneath a tree and writing and reading and working at our projects for whatever we do. Reality is also, though, lying down at night next to someone who loves you. Sometimes reality is simply lying down with a good book or your 8-year-old dog. Reality is a child babbling in the room next door down the hall, or the sound of your granddaughter laughing at something completely nonsensical. Reality is waking up to a brilliant sun in the morning. Reality is a still, quiet walk at 2 a.m. looking up at a full moon that you forgot was there. Reality is the risk we take and we use and discover joy and comfort in the last place we thought likely. And sometimes the reality is that where I am, that where we are, that where we find ourselves is just as it is and has to be just enough. My book may only sell a few hundred copies. That was in the first year. It may sell a dozen this year. My project may only be an exercise in working through the dream. My kids may not grow up or be as I imagined they would all be. Reality is knowing that at least one person, though, needs to hear what I have to say. That one person needs the conversation that you have to offer. That one person needs the idea that is smoldering and burning and cooking in your heart. It is a thing that only I can tell, that only you can share. That is the reality. And it won't get the attention of the Huffington Post, and it may only get a smattering of hits online, if that, and it may irritate some because it's not biblical enough or conservative enough or has enough funny jokes in it or is just a weird hypnotist. Reality is me doing it anyway. Reality is me telling the story anyway. Once upon a time. Once upon a time there was a hunter. And the hunter and his son went out into the woods. The hunter shot a bush rat, handed it to his son. The son took the bush rat as his father walked off, and he tossed it into the woods. Later that evening, when they got together and they looked at what they had not caught anything that day. The father turned to his son and he said, "Where's the bush rat? At least we can eat something and we won't starve." And the son looked up and said, "I threw it away." And the father took a stick and he hit his son. And the son got up and left. Now the son wandered for some time, and after days and days of wandering, the son came to a village where there was a king, and the king saw the young man and thought he looked so much like his own son, his son that he had lost years before, that he took him in and he said, "You will be my son. You are just like my son. You will be my son. You will have everything." And so the young man stayed for some time, and he had the kingdom. But the advisors kind of doubted the whole thing. And even his wife was a little confused and unsure. And so the advisors sent the son out with others and said, "Let's gather them all up, all of the sons, and we'll send them out into the forest with their horses. And then they are instructed to kill their horses. And this will tell us something." And so the son, the supposed king's son, and all the others went out into the woods, and with their horses on horseback. And they all killed their horses, including the son they did not believe. And when the advisors saw, well, this has to be the king's son, because look at the abandon with which he just destroys and wastes resources. Only someone with abundance would be that careless. So they said it must be so. And they convinced the queen. And everyone was happy until one day the hunter returned. And the hunter wandered into the kingdom and found his son and said, "Son, you must come back with me." But when the king saw this, he went to the hunter and said, "I'll make a deal. I'll give you anything you want. I'll pay 3 times that. Leave your son, turn, and go home." But the father completed, the hunter, he pleaded with his son time and time again until finally the king could see that it came down to this. He said, the three of us must go out and decide. And so they went out into a clearing in the forest, all three on their horses, dismounted, and the king got off his horse, handed his sword to the son, and said, you can kill your father and have me and the gold and the kingdom. Or you can kill me and have your father, but you have to choose. Reality says, we've been there before. Reality says, you and I are in the woods. Reality says we have to make tough choices sometimes. Reality says that we're standing there with the sword and don't know which one we would do. Would we kill the king? Would we kill the father? What would you do? The dream is the magical ending, right? The dream is we get to keep it all. The dream is we all walk off happily living forever after in the forest with the kingdom and the father and the rat and everything else. Reality, however, says that sometimes I have to admit I have hit my son. Metaphorically, I have probably cut him down to size so many times. Reality says that, in fact, we have all done that. Reality, in fact, says that we all strike at one another, oftentimes without even realizing it. And I may do it again without ever knowing. I may do it in a staff meeting. I may do it here this morning or some other morning. I may do it in a conversation where I find myself. The reality is our words and our opinions and our thinking and our acting can cut at the very root of life itself. But the dream is that I'll be the first one, perhaps. Maybe I'll be the first father that breaks that cycle. I'll be the first parent. I'll be the first employer. I'll be the first fellow worker and teammate that will break that cycle of backbiting, of striking with the stick. I may be the first one who won't wound those who I love or work with or meet from day to day, unintentionally or intentionally. The dream is you on that path in the woods, and your pursuit is only one small bush rat, one small poem, one simple song, one conversation, one book that gets published but isn't selling anymore, one good sermon out of a full year of you're just wondering why somebody even invited you to stand up here in the first place, one project meeting with executives that you met with the executives but you just couldn't pull off the sale, one attempt at a meaningful relationship but something wasn't right. Reality is that we may get struck ourselves by an axe in the wood along the way, and we're laying there in the dark, and the dream seems dead, and we ask ourselves, how do we break the cycle? Okay, so maybe reality is we got lucky. Maybe reality is that, in fact, we got the king's goods. Things are going great. I'm living the dream. We live in a kingdom. And so what if a few horses had to get killed along the way? The dream is no animals were harmed in the telling of this story. The reality is we are all stick and axe wielders. We are all horse slaughterers. We are rat squandering children. And we are ruthless kings at times giving unsavory advice. So who would you kill? The father? The king? Would I kill myself? The reality is, I don't know.